Hello and welcome to the Masters of Urban and Regional Planning webinar. I'm so glad that you decided to join us. My name is John West. I am the graduate coordinator for the Urban Planning program. I'm also an assistant professor of urban planning. And the way that this webinar works is I have some students here. We're going to have a little conversation. There's also a chat feature. You can log in and ask questions, and we will answer them live during the webinar. I would also, in addition to inviting you to participate in the webinar, I'd invite you to reach out to me if you have any questions about the program. My email is jhwest@bsu.edu, or you can just email planning@bsu.edu. With that, I'm going to introduce my students here. We have Megan Jennings and Kaya Mullins, and I guess I'll just ask you a question. So, can you tell me who you are and what you do in the program?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, like John said, I'm Megan Jennings. I'm a second-year master's student in the urban planning program. Between my master's program and my undergraduate program, I worked for 4 years in Lexington and in planning, and just decided to come back to my master's and learn a little bit more about planning. Specifically, I have an interest in development planning, so I've been pursuing that while here at Ball State.
Very nice. Yeah.
I'm Kaya Mullins. I did my undergrad here at Ball State, and I've in anthropology, and then decided to go into straight into my master's for urban planning. And I'm now a second year in the program. So,
very nice. So I guess my first question, and I like to think back on this myself, what was it that originally got you excited about urban planning as a discipline that you wanted to do your master's in?
Mm-hmm. In my undergraduate program, I was a geography major, and I took a few cartography courses and learned GIS, which is a mapping program and data analysis. With that skill set, I was able to get an internship in Lexington's Division of Planning and got to learn a little bit more about urban and rural planning as well as community gardens. And I came back to school, that was my senior year, and kind of redirected my courses to learn more about planning practices. And after I graduated, was able to get a job in the Division of Planning. And while there, I worked in comprehensive planning, development planning, as well as zoning, and became really passionate about, I guess, the advocacy side of planning, and specifically within development planning. So I came back here to Ball State to learn more about that, the process and some of the principles.
Very nice.
for me, during my undergrad, I focused on studying homeless culture. And I got very frustrated with the fact that we could talk to these people and understand their culture and understand how their world is, but we couldn't do anything about it. It was just understanding and understanding more and more. But anthropologists really can't do anything after that. So I decided to talk to my professor, and he suggested urban planning because you can do something and change policy to make a difference. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is one thing that makes urban planning an interesting discipline. It is an academic discipline, but it's aimed at professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So we think deeply about questions, but we also think about how to do and change and make new things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this would probably be to the benefit of our viewers. Can you tell us a little bit about your application process? What was how did you find out about the program? Why did you decide on the program? What was it like once you made that decision? Can you walk us through a little bit?
Okay, so for me, since I started talking to homeless culture and got interested in doing something, I went to my professor and he talked to me, and he suggested urban planning. And I had no idea what that was. So he set me up with my advisor, the advisor sat me down and we talked about like what goes into urban planning. And I already had a GIS minor, and then I had some background with housing and studying housing. So he set me up with a meeting with Scott Truex, who's our current chair, I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was really interested about his perspective, my perspective. And so he had me join his Planning 100 class, which is Introduction to Urban Planning, and I fell in love with it. The process of talking to people, which is exactly what I learned for the past 4 years, and understanding the people, and then doing advocacy and doing change in policy. And so I talked to Scott again, and he took me to Nihal Pereira, who was our former chair, and we talked about, and I got me into the urban planning master's program, and I applied, and I got accepted, and that process was going through the website and going through all the questions and stuff, and yeah, I got in. So yeah,
So Kaya is one of our students who actually has an undergraduate degree from Ball State. I would say perhaps a third of the students I've worked with in my 5 years start out at Ball State. The other 2/3 come from outside of the program. We have a significant number of students who come from other undergraduate degrees in the United States, students who come from professional practice like Megan, and we have maybe a little less than a third, maybe a quarter or less of our students are coming from abroad. And so we have sort of a rich diversity of entrants into our programs, both professionals and recently graduated students, people who really know the heck out of Cincinnati, and people who are very passionate about cities that I've never even heard of, that they grew up in.
Yeah.
So, and so you came as a professional.
Yes.
How did you discover the urban planning program at Ball State, and what was your process like?
So I'm originally from kind of the Western Ohio part of the country, I guess. And so I was honestly looking at universities within like an hour or two drive from where my parents currently live. Just convenient to kind of be back home. And so I toured at Ohio State, and then I came and toured here at Ball State, and really fell in love with the size of the program. It was much more personable. The tour guide was a current master's student, and she was just like a ball of energy and light, and I had a really good time. And I got to meet with two of the faculty members, Scott and Nihal, that Kaya had mentioned, and just really felt like they wanted to support me in pursuing my own academic interest and professional career and enhancing that. And I didn't feel like I was just a student in the program, that I was Megan Jennings, a master's student interested in development planning with a background in Lexington. And so that's kind of how I fell in love with the master's program here at Ball State and decided to apply.
Yeah. It's funny that you mention that, because I have been teaching for 10 years, 5 of them at Ball State, and I worked at universities that had, I guess, a much less personal attention approach to master's degree delivery. We would have 35 students in a class. We would lecture, the students would turn in final papers, and that was basically all the contact that we had with them. And when I came to Ball State, I didn't really know East Central Indiana very well. I'm from Pittsburgh. I lived most of my adult life in Chicago and New York. And so I thought, a small town, what's this all about? But then the program and the fact that we have significant contact with students really got me enthusiastic about it. And there's one other thing that I'd like to circle back around for folks who are watching. If you're interested in coming and doing a tour of the program, you can just email planning@bsu.edu, and we'll set up a time for you to come and take a tour of our facilities. And there are specific elements of the program that I want to talk to you about that I think make us unique and help to give that personalized sort of graduate experience. The first thing I wanted to talk about was our studio class environment. One of the really unique things that the urban planning program at Ball State does is offer studio classes. Would either of you feel comfortable describing what a studio is?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
We were both in the same studio last spring, and so I'm sure we'll talk over each other. It was a comprehensive planning studio with Professor Michael Burrieti. We worked with a small town just north of Muncie, Montpelier, and they have some really unique assets in their downtown, but the vacancy rates there and the commercial representation is kind of low and a little struggling. So we came together as a studio with current leaders, community leaders and government leaders in Montpelier to work together to create a plan for their downtown and also their parks, which were an integral component of their downtown. So we had conversations with them about their vision for their community and their downtown, and with our knowledge in the principles and practices of planning, we're able to propose ways that they could enhance their downtown, encourage new businesses, encourage, I guess, new life in the downtown. Do you have anything to add to that?
What I really loved about that class was that we got to work with, we were first years, and then we got to work with second years. So me feeling like I had no knowledge of urban planning at the time, since I was an anthropology student, I felt really welcomed and I could ask questions freely, and my ideas and were like, we could just talk them out. And I ended up doing a lot of surveys just because of my anthropology background. So they help you use your skills and then guide it towards urban planning and use that to help you learn and learn more. And it's really, it was fun.
Yeah. Within that studio, we kind of grouped up into our own little specialties, I guess. And so we were able to work together as small teams to put together one large product. It was a really encouraging and fun environment to be in. We all really got to know each other well during that semester. I think it was a total of 15 of us in that class, which is, I think, larger for a master's studio, but it was a really good experience.
And one of the unique elements of the urban planning program at Ball State, and I say this having worked at several other programs, is that from the time that you walk in the door, your first semester in class, you're going to be working with government officials. You're going to be working with mayors and city council people and county commissioners. You're going to be working with representatives of the community, and you're going to be going out and trying to find people who will talk to you about how they want their community to change. So this element of actually getting out and getting to know the people who can influence what your plan is a really useful part of our program. And sort of another element, so we have these studio classes, and Professor Burrieti has been teaching the same studio class for years, and each year he finds a different community that needs to have their comprehensive plan updated. And so he goes out and talks to the mayor, talks to the Chamber of Commerce and others who are interested in updating their comprehensive plan. And then the studio class, the students actually go ahead and do the work. So at the end of the class, the community ends up with a useful product that will help to sort of define their development priorities, and the students get that hands-on experience. There's another kind of class that we do in the program, and it's sort of throughout Ball State. There's an emphasis on what we call immersive learning. Immersive learning is working in or with a community to accomplish some sort of mutually beneficial goal. And the first time I had Kaya and Megan in class was in an immersive learning class that I taught, where we were trying to think about what to do about rental problems in Muncie, Indiana. So we read a book together. We read a book called Eviction that sort of tells of the horrors of low-income housing in Milwaukee. And then we sat down and thought about what we wanted to do about it. And maybe you can pick up the story from there. What did we do in that class? What did we do in our qualitative methods class last year?
I'll let you jump in because I know you're really passionate about this.
So with that, we started with those readings, and we talked about like just rentals in general, I think and then we did some more readings to understand qualitative methods. And then it kind of moved on to actually talking to like nonprofits and residents of the community and current renters. And I thought that was really interesting because we worked with like Sarah Renee from Bridges Community Service Inc. And she had crazy stories about rentals and like bad like housing situations. And we were thinking of like, how can we inform renters to be more prepared for situations like that, or how can we prevent people being stuck in situations? And so we kind of worked from there and like made sections of like main topics and then put that into the renter's book, I feel like. So like my big section was the FAQs of like, what does it mean to be evicted, or what happens when you go to a court for eviction? And then what happens if you have a felony? And like I talked to one of the resident participants, and he was like, yes, you need to answer questions like that. Like, and he even added some more that I needed to answer that needed to be in the book because people just don't know. And that was really rewarding because we actually turned out with the actual book. Like,
So just to take a step back, after we did our readings and talked a little bit about qualitative methods, we decided that the best approach was to create what ended up being called the Renter's Book, which is basically like a tour guide through all of the terrible things that can happen to you if you're either a landlord or a tenant. And it provides information for what to do if you're facing an eviction, if you have your heater goes out in the middle of the winter, or if you're a landlord and you can't get someone out. And in addition to that, it includes forms that you can fill out, and that are letters that you would send to your landlord or send to the proper authorities to try to remedy the situation. So it's kind of like a very hands-on text that people can use to address their rental problems. And there was another unique part to this class. The class was funded in part by the Building Better Neighborhoods program here at Ball State, and we were actually able to pay people from the community to attend class and be sort of expert participants in the class, giving us information about rental conditions and sort of the real problems. So we had community participants, everyone from a pastor to a landlord to a guy that was living sort of on the edge of homelessness. And our classes were in a church on the south side of Muncie, and we had these conversations about what are rental conditions like, what kind of information would you need in order to make your housing conditions better. What was your role in the class, Megan? How did you feel about that?
So I ended up doing a lot of the organizing of the contents and the final design of the product itself. And that coordination and seeing all the pieces come together was really unique. And I guess I'm not sure what else to say about that besides the product itself was extremely informed and researched by the students, and then also having those weekly the local experts, the landlord, the pastor, the Don, who was the man on the edge of homelessness. They all came together every week to kind of help us create this document. So it was a well-informed, well-rounded document that we were able to put our names in at the end of the time and say, look what we have attempted to create for the citizens of Muncie, and advocate for them and with them in this issue.
And I know the residents and the participants were really excited about it because their name was a part of it, and Muncie needed something like that. So,
and one of the fun outcomes of that class was that we put together a draft of our book, and we invited all of the people, so city officials, representatives, nonprofits, all kinds of different experts. We brought them into a conference that we held to discuss the contents of the Renter's Book, and we all met. There were about 25 of us at Muncie Mission, and talked through the information that was in the book, made sure that what we had in there was accurate and representative, and also, found some places where we could improve some things.
Yeah.
And then at the end of that process, one of the nonprofits that was in the room decided to take the information from the class and use it in order as part of their programming. So it's a low-income housing nonprofit called Passstone, and they took our information. They also hired one of our students to polish the book up and make it available online. And so you can, if you go to Passstone Muncie, just Google that, the first thing that comes up on their webpage is our student work. Yeah. We've talked a lot about that. I'm very passionate about it. I could talk about it for another half hour. So we started talking a little bit about how that class transitioned into an internship and then a graduate assistantship. You both have experience with those aspects of our program.
Right.
Can you tell me about your internship experience?
Sure. So this past summer, I had an internship with Delaware County's GIS and Planning Commission. My time there was over the summer, and I got plugged in with Cardinal Greenways, which is the local recreational trail. It's actually Indiana's longest recreational trail, and helped them with, they have many events over the summer, and so I got plugged in helping them organize and advertise the events. I ended up doing a lot of social media and graphic creation for them, and then also helped at the events as well, just coordinating information, registration, all the fun stuff. So the first event was a huge bike event in downtown. It was a 3-day event with different tours around downtown. We did a historic tour where we took people on routes through town looking at historic properties. We did a brewery tour, which is always a hit. And then we also did a public art tour, so going through town and looking at different installations. And then the third day of that event was like this huge, it's a Grand Prix criterium race. And so it was competition and a route through downtown. It was really exciting. I'm definitely not a cyclist, but it was a lot of fun to be a part of and see the community come together during that event. So that was a lot of fun. It was a good internship for the summer, and it was nice to also stay in Muncie for the summer.
So I'm currently going through my interviews to try to get internships this summer. But for graduate assistantship, I currently work for Habitat of Greater Muncie, who have me help assist with the 812 Coalition, which is it's a group of nonprofits within Muncie that help do community redevelopment in the south side of Muncie. And it's been really interesting working with them and helping them with their steering committee and helping them bring, I made like a brochure about some of their projects that there's currently going on, along with helping them collect data and analyze data. So it's been really interesting and really hands-on, which is really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
So one of the requirements of our program is that every student does an internship. Internships are mandatory, and you sort of have to find a place that fits for you. And the goal of that is to start students on the path towards finding their eventual job. Our program graduates students who work in the nonprofit sector, as we've kind of discussed at length, but I would say a majority of our students either work in local government or the private sector, working for architecture, engineering, and planning firms. So we have a nice mix of internship opportunities that encompass the nonprofit sector, but also include like going to work for a firm in Chicago and designing plazas in downtown areas. I'm not a designer by nature, but it is one of the strengths of our program. So especially Megan has a real affinity for graphic design.
Thank you.
And Kaya right now is taking our Charette graphics class. And one of the things that's maybe a little bit unique about our program is that we still do a lot of hand drawing. So whenever we listen to community members, sort of what their desires are for the future, one of the skills that we want planners to have is the ability to sort of render that by hand in real time. And that's what we call charrette graphics. So Another element of our program that I think creates a lot of sort of connection is our field trips. Every fall we cancel class for a week and we take all the students to, usually there's 2 or 3 different field trip options. Can you tell me about your field trip experiences?
Sure. So my first year I went on a field trip to Cincinnati. They were hosting the Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana Planning Conference during that time. And so a group went to Cincinnati. We toured at the local city planning department and learned more about some of the, I guess, how they function, their structure, and how many plans they put out a year, and how they work with the localities within or I guess the little cities within Cincinnati. So that was a really cool experience, and the conference itself, it's 3 states. All of the professional and practicing planners in those 3 states can come together and attend informational and educational sessions, and there's a lot of networking and connecting with planners to see what projects they're doing in their cities, and just kind of learning from each other during that time. So it was a really exciting time, or field trip, and a lot of fun, and also it was fun to hang out with students outside of class. It's both graduate students and undergraduate students, and that's a really unique time, I guess, to get to know everyone. The undergrads almost have an upper hand. They have, 2 more years of planning experience and background in history, so it's fun as a graduate student who doesn't have a background in planning to come into the master's program and be able to learn alongside the undergraduate students.
That's really well put. That is an aspect of our program that's unique. We're one of only 13 universities in the United States that offer a bachelor's degree in urban planning, and a fair number of our students who do the bachelor's degree continue on and do their master's. So there's often classes with students who have been studying planning for 4 years, and also people who've been working in the field of urban planning and people who are totally new to the field. It creates a really nice blend. But I'd just like to take a moment to remind those of you who are watching at home to take a second and think of any questions that you might have for us, because we can answer your questions in real time here while we're talking. Any questions you have about applications, about the program, about sort of your professional goals, anything in the whole world, we're interested in talking about it. So just go ahead and send us a chat, and we'll talk about it here. What about you? What was your internship experience like?
Field trip.
Field trip?
Field trips.
Yeah. I haven't been able to go in on any field trips yet, but I did this summer go for a study abroad where I went to Bosnia and Herzegovina for urban anthropology, which it was really fun because I went with anthropology group, but also another urban planning student, Long Yang, came with me. So we went to Bosnia and we had to talk to people and ask them, like, what is your city? How do we get to know your city? So we got to learn the city through its people and did a bottom-up effect. So they took us on tours, they took us to nonprofits in Bosnia. What else did we do?
We did sketches and stuff too, right?
Yeah, we did sketches so we could participate in slow ethnography, where you just sit down and you draw the scene so you can really understand what's going on around you, notice the tiny details because you have to draw them on the piece of paper. And it was really nice because people there were so sweet, and the story there is kind of sad since the recent war, but they're recovering and they're just such a strong group of people, and it really helps you see the impact the city can do on its people, and how the city are still the backbone and can make it grow even through war, through poverty and issues with food. It was just a really great experience. I had a really good time.
I did a study abroad as well this past summer. A group of 15 of us went to Germany, and we kind of did a tour all around. We hit the 5 major cities, Munich and Frankfurt, Cologne, Hamburg, and Berlin. And it was a 2-week trip. It was led by an urban planning professor and a landscape architecture professor. And so we basically did walking tours every day and looked at main historical sites. We hit big parks and planning or development projects, I guess, and it was a lot of fun. It was a really cool experience, and to see, I guess, the history, especially between West and East Germany, was really cool and a lot of fun.
I love the pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, once again, just to kind of situate the viewers here, we've been talking about Kaya and Megan's experiences in the program. We've been talking a little bit about their application experience. We've been talking about internships, field trips, studio classes. And for the viewers at home, it's a funny phrase, for the viewers at home, I would like for you to consider the fact that the Masters of Urban and Regional Planning offers several dual degrees. We don't have any dual degree students here with us today, but last year, one of our students, Christina, decided that she wanted to get a master's in urban planning and a master's in urban design at the same time. And she took 1 year of classes in the urban planning program, and then she took another year of classes in Indianapolis, where the urban design program is offered. We also have dual degree programs set up with public administration, so students who want to learn a little bit more about city government. And we have a dual degree program set up with historic preservation. And it's an ongoing discussion that we have with departments around campus. If you have another discipline that you're interested in and considering doing a dual degree, there can be some real advantages to that, because you actually can save 15 credit hours for getting both degrees. You can end up getting the degree in as short as 2 years, with summer in there as well. But I see that we have some questions on the screen here, and I'm going to read them and try to address them. So, what financial aid is available for the program? The predominant form of financial aid for the program is competitive graduate assistantships. Both of the students who are here with me today have graduate assistantships, and I'll explain sort of how that what that is, and then they can talk a little bit more about their experience in those graduate assistantships. So a graduate assistantship is actually a partnership between our department and some sort of usually nonprofit or governmental agency. And the deal is the university pays for tuition, and the nonprofit entity pays a stipend for the students to live on while they're on campus. So the student ends up paying some fees, but you're not paying tuition, and you're not paying, and you're actually getting paid a little bit of money. So it's quite a nice deal, and it's a deal that we have historically offered to a few students. It's competitive, and there's an additional essay that you have to write as part of your application in order to be eligible for the assistantship. Can you tell me how did you find out about the assistantship program, and what was the application process like for you?
I learned about the assistantship when I toured. I knew that they were available at the master's level, and so while on my tour I was able to ask Nihal, the former chair, about that process, and so he helped direct me to the graduate school application, and then also said that for the planning graduate assistantship, you just write an essay, I don't remember what the prompt was, and send it specifically to the planning department, and they would try to connect you with offices and see if you would need to interview or qualify for it.
For me, one of the main reasons I stayed at Ball State was because of the graduate assistantship, and it helps with the finances of college. My first graduate assistantship, Nihal and Scott helped me get. I was an assistant for one of our professors, and I helped him take pictures of freshman projects, help him grade some worksheets, and just helped him through class in general. And then for the second assistantship with the 812, I went to you and you helped set up that connection. And I interviewed with my current boss, Jenna Ashby, who's works at Habitat. And that process kind of went from there. And yeah.
I would say that if you're interested in applying for an assistantship, definitely look at the Ball State Urban Planning application site. You can just Google that, Ball State Urban Planning Master's application. And then also send me an email at jhwest@bsu.edu or send an email to our office at planning@bsu.edu, and we can give you further instructions and links in order to make the process easier. Yeah. So we have another question here. What kind of professional development opportunities are available? And I'm going to start with one, and then I'm going to switch over to the students here, because Megan actually has with her portfolio.
Oh, not on me. It's in my backpack.
Yeah,
I forgot to grab it.
In her backpack. So one of the things that students walk out of our program with is a highly polished professional portfolio. And we do a series of, we sort of review each student's portfolio, and then we bring them in and do a mock job talk. So you come in and you've identified a job that you're going to apply to, and you have to pretend like we're interviewing you, like we're your potential boss. And the professors get really mean when we do this.
Yeah.
And ask really hard questions. And so it's kind of some job prep, the portfolio review and job application process.
Yeah.
What other professional opportunities have you taken part of here in the program?
So both of my graduate assistantships have been with government agencies, which is where I want to continue to work once I graduate. So I'll consider that in itself professional development. I've worked in MPOs, which are metropolitan planning areas. They're bigger than a county, typically. They cross county and multiple government boundaries. And so getting involved in those larger regional projects has been a lot of fun. And then also attending conferences. We have state planning conferences, and then I mentioned that my field trip was to a tri-state conference. So those are good opportunities to learn more and to develop your professional skills.
Yeah.
For me, I want to work with nonprofits mostly in community development. So the graduate assistantship helps you make the connections. Like if you are honest in like answering what kind of graduate assistantship you want and where you want to end up, like they'll help you get to where you need to be. So for me, it was with the 812 Coalition. So I can understand partnerships with residents, partnerships between organizations, and like organization of the organizations.
I see just to put a final point on this professional development question, I think that relative to other urban planning programs in the United States, the end goal of the Masters of Urban and Regional Planning is to turn out students who are ready to work on day one. And from employers, we get feedback that we graduate students who are motivated and ready to take on a professional role. And maybe this is a discussion for a little bit later. We have an excellent job placement rate. I can't think of any students who aren't working in the field of urban planning who have graduated since I got there.
Yeah.
From any student who's graduated from our urban and regional planning program. And I see there's another question here. How often are there networking events, career fairs, guest speakers, etc.? Okay, I'll have to think about that for a second. So networking events, I think a lot of the networking in our program happens through our studio classes and through our immersive learning classes. We do hold a career fair in the early spring. It just occurred. It's for all of the students who are in the College of Architecture and Planning. There's a Ball State-wide career fair. Did either of you attend either of those events?
I attended the CAP one.
Oh, okay. What was that like? Were there planning firms there that were?
Yes, there were a mixture of architecture, landscape architecture, and planning firms. Most of the planning firms were local governments, and I guess some private design firms were there that were interested in urban planning students as well.
And then I went to a Ball State-wide one before in my undergrad, and it's various different businesses, and all of them, a lot of them have Ball State alumni that got them there in the first place. So it's really interesting to see places you can go after you graduate and talking to those people that of their experiences, and then going into the professional world.
And just speaking to the question of guest speakers, Ball State, in a sense, has figured out a little niche for itself that crosses a lot of disciplines, and that is trying to study and understand the dilemmas of small cities and of cities that are losing population. And so every year there's a consortium of departments that holds a small cities conference. It's actually being held in spring of this year. It would be a great thing to come up and check out. It's mostly academics and professionals talking about how to address the issues of small cities. In addition to that, we have a guest speaker series for the College of Architecture and Planning. We bring in, it can be a little heavy on the Starchitect sometimes, but we usually get some good professional planners in to talk about the discipline during the year. Have you been to any other guest speaker events?
I attended one of this last year. Elizabeth Plater-Zyberg, who's part of the Congress of New Urbanism, came and gave a talk on, I guess, the history of their firm and their movement, and that was really amazing to have her at Ball State.
Yeah, it's kind of, we sort of punch above our weight in terms of the speakers that we get. Yeah.
And then in Planning 100, Introduction to Planning, Scott Truex brings in a lot of alumni and past students. And even when you don't attend that class, they come for a tour and you can introduce yourself to them and those alumni. And it's really interesting to talk to them.
We kind of have an open door policy with our alumni, and we invite them, especially at the end of the semester, to review student works. So we'll have alumni on campus sort of checking out what you've been doing for the year, asking questions, and that's also a great place for networking, professional development, and meeting sort of leading people in your field. We have had everybody from the mayor of Muncie to the former mayor of Indianapolis to the former head of the Metropolitan Planning Department in Indianapolis come and review student work, and that's really kind of intimate networking that's based on what you've been doing. So I see another question here, and I think that this one might be a good one for Kaya, because the question is, I want to pursue a dual degree in Masters of Urban and Regional Planning and MUD, but do not have an art background. MUD stands for Masters of Urban Development. Design, thank you. Masters of Urban Design, and that's kind of an art-heavy discipline. And I think that maybe Kaya can speak to this, because the Urban and Regional planning program itself is pretty design heavy. You do end up taking some classes that are very similar to art classes. How has that been for you?
It's kind of scary at first, I will admit that. But we have an amazing professor, Lauren Deeg, and he kind of works with you to start with the very beginnings of just how to basically draw like the person itself. He teaches you Adobe?
Adobe Creative.
Adobe Creative, the whole suite. So we go through like InDesign, we go through Illustrator, Photoshop, and he teaches you step by step how to do that, because I had no idea. And then he even he's an amazing artist, so you feel a little bad that you can't draw as well as him. But at the same time, he takes you every step of the way and teaches you how to draw the trees, how to color it correctly, how to get a good shadow. And he's open to questions, and it's really easy to talk to him, and it's a good experience. And plus, a lot of some of the students have design backgrounds, so you can always talk to other students in your class. And it's really the collaboration between professors and students and talking to each other really helps. So it's not as scary.
Megan is a natural designer. She really, she really has a lot of talent in that department. But what's your experience been with the arty side of urban planning?
So I've never done when I was in grade school, I did sketching, but it was always like a copying your image. And so coming into, and then I just am personally interested in graphic design, so I've kind of pursued that on my own outside of my career. But the class that Kai is talking about, you're learning about rendering for planning and development. And so it's definitely a different approach to art, and it's been a little challenging for me. I'm a little particular and a perfectionist, and with this kind of drawing, it needs to be a little loose and fast, or not fast, but about quick, just because it's more about communicating an idea rather than specifics. So that's been a really interesting learning curve, I guess.
And it occurs to me that with urban planning, you're learning how to design, how to draw and do art quickly in order to communicate to some sort of public, a charrette group or your constituencies. And then with the urban design program, you're going to learn sort of more about how to make a final product. You're going to learn some of the more specific applications and programs that you need to render what an entire community is going to look like. But we do a little bit of that too. You learn SketchUp, and what other programs do you use in the?
It's kind of merging Google Earth, SketchUp, and Photoshop all together. You put together a proposal in SketchUp, and then you kind of supplant that on top of a Google map 3D and 2D image. And then, finesse it in Photoshop.
It's the finessing that really matters.
It's really cool that you can draw something and then put it in a real situation or the actual corner. Because like for us, we did a Muncie redevelopment plan. So I had an empty vacant lot, and I literally put an actual nonprofit or a daycare right on that spot with like everything else normal around it.
And bringing it into that 3D space, even though it was previously a rendering or a SketchUp model, allows you to better understand the physical form and kind of the context in a 3D format. So that allows us to kind of critique our own proposals, see what works, see what doesn't.
Oh, that's something I'd never considered. So the fact that you have an idea, you draw it, and then you put it in the context gives you an idea of how it would work in practice. That's very cool. So we have another question here. The application requires a portfolio. How might one fulfill that requirement? The application does not require a portfolio.
I think they were talking about MUD.
Oh, the Masters of Urban, the Master of Urban Design. So that would be a question that maybe I could take off air. If you want to email me at jhwest@bsu.edu, I can put you in touch with the director of the Masters of Urban Development Design program, and he can answer that question. But why don't we talk just a little bit about what's in your portfolios, because this might spark some ideas for whoever our audience member is. What is contained in the portfolios that you're presenting to the to us?
I guess my portfolio is a little unique, although yours is too with the anthropology. I had previous planning experience, so I was able to add that into my portfolio. I included classwork in with that, policy memos, some essays about planning principles and policies, and then also the design work that we got to do in our class with Lauren Deeg. So it's kind of a smorgasbord of graphics, of data analytics, and then also writing.
For me, I'm currently working on my portfolio. So I think I got 3 weeks until I have to go through the review process, which I'm excited
You'll
about.
Be good.
Yeah, it's going to be fine. So in mine, since I have a different kind of background, I'm putting more of my anthropology research. I worked at a museum for a short part of time and doing adding some of my cultural research for some of the art pieces, the art design from our design class and charrette class, and then I'm not sure what else I'm going to add yet, because it's still in works.
Well, Megan said the magic words for a portfolio that meets our standards, and I don't know if this is true for the Masters of Urban Design, but we want to see a portfolio that contains examples of your written work So, and especially professional writing, we ask that students include a memo, some sort of writing that shows that you know how to do research and communicate it in written format. We also ask that students include analytical work. And when we're talking about analytical work, what we mean is that you're able to take numbers, information, and data and turn it into some sort of conclusion or suggestion. So you have demographic analysis of Muncie, you have an analysis of the housing stock of Muncie, and you show that in the numbers, you show that graphically in the numbers, but then you also explain what does that mean and what should we do based on that information. So there's the writing component, there's the analysis component, and then the final component is is graphics. And that's probably what's going to be emphasized in a Master of Urban Design program, so that's probably where you'd want to start. And that's going to contain examples of just what Megan was describing, your SketchUp images, your hand renderings, other sorts of graphic products like maybe the cover of a plan that you've created. So it's really those three things. It's writing, it's analysis, and it's graphic representation. And if you have more questions, please feel free to ask me. So I think we've run through our questions here. I have more questions for you, and now that we're in front of camera, I get to ask you the really difficult questions.
Oh no.
So what, if you could imagine, what are your future aspirations once you graduate from the program? Let's say a year down the road, 5 years down the road,
Oh Lord.
15 years down the road.
So within the next year, I'll be hopefully graduating in May of this year, and so I'm currently looking and applying for jobs. So I guess in the next year, I will hopefully have a job in planning. I'm actually pretty sure I'll have a job in a planning-related field. I personally want to remain in public planning and in planning offices, and I do want to focus on development planning. So if I can kind of work with zoning ordinances or subdivision regulations, that would be ideal. In the next 5 years, I guess continue to work in development planning and make my way up the ladder, maybe become a manager of development planning or zoning. And then in 15 years, I don't know quite yet. Yeah. I think for a retirement plan, not in 15 years. I would like to maybe eventually move actually into the private realm and put together development proposals. Kind of a nice creative outlet, I guess.
We have a lot of students who make that transition, who bounce back and forth between the public sector and the private sector and the nonprofit sector.
Yeah.
So it's totally doable.
Thanks. Yay.
For me, I'm graduating in December of this year, so I'm excited. I'm hoping to work for public, so city governments, or hopefully in a nonprofit or a CDC or Community Development Corporation. So, because I really want to work with the homeless population and housing specifically, which is just my passion. In eventual time, I'm not sure yet. I think I'm going to go back for my PhD, and so I can hopefully get a job as a professor. So, but I don't know yet. So we'll see.
That's actually a career outcome that's more common than you'd expect from our program. I would say we've graduated a fair number of students who have gone on to do academic work, both in planning and in urban studies and international development, a variety of different kind of academic disciplines. But now that I've put you on the spot with that question, I don't think I have anything further. If anyone in the audience has any questions, please feel free to email me at jhwest@bsu.edu or at planning@bsu.edu for our administrative staff. Do you want to ask me any questions that will make me feel like I'm on the spot to end?
How long have you been working at Ball State in the planning department?
I've been working in the planning department for 5 years. Okay.
And so now you are the grad coordinator?
Yes, I am.
What, I guess, what is the most frustrating thing working with graduate students? Can I ask that question?
What's the most frustrating thing?
Yeah.
I'm going to be really honest.
Oh, gosh.
Like, the most frustrating thing working with graduate students is that you all are really capable. Right? You really can do excellent work. And there's just a lot of self-doubt And also a lot of sort of sometimes lack of willingness to try something crazy or different or new. I think that we emphasize practical and professional, and sometimes it would be nice to see you all push the boundaries a little bit more.
Create a class.
The class pushing the
Pushing boundaries, yeah.
Very nice. Kai, do you want to try one, or are you good?
I'm good.
Okay. Very nice. Well, thank you very much for tuning in, and if you have any questions, please email me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.